You can now link Google Optimize with Google Analytics 4. And in this video, I will show you how to do that, plus how to see that data in Google Analytics 4 reports. Hey, my name is Julius and welcome to the Analytics Mania YouTube channel, where you can learn how to work with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. So if you want to stay up to date with GA4, then consider subscribing to this channel. At the moment of recording this video, Google Optimize and Google Analytics integration is still in beta, so some things might change in the future. However, there is already one big improvement compared to the previous version of Google Analytics, and I'll show it at the end of this video. So, let's connect Google Optimize with GA4 and build our first report. When I'm recording this video, the integration between Optimize and Google Analytics 4 is still in beta. This means that some features are missing or limited. For example, at the moment, you can install Google Optimize container snippet only by adding it directly to the source code of the website. If you want to link Google Analytics 4 and Optimize, but your Optimize container is installed with Google Tag Manager, right now that will not work. But if you're watching this in the future, then there's a very high chance that Google Tag Manager will also be supported. I will post several links below the video, for example this one, where you can see the differences between Universal Analytics integration of Optimize and GA4. To get started, you will already need to have a Google Analytics 4 property and website data stream, and I presume that you already know how to do that. If you don't, then check the link below the video on how to install Google Analytics 4 on your website. Then in Google Optimize, you should create a new container. If you are completely new to Optimize, then click Create Account, and then enter your, let's say, business name right here. So I can enter something like testing. Then you will need to review terms and conditions, select your country, and then click Next. And then you will need to create a container. If you already have a Google Optimize account, then click plus in your existing account, and then enter container name. It can be, let's say, the name of your website or the URL of your website. So let's say that I will enter my demo website and then click Create. When you create a container, you will need to install its code on your website. And as I've said, as of the moment of recording this video, Google Optimize must be added directly to the source code of the website. Google Tag Manager integration is not yet available, but it will be available in the future. So click Settings, and then scroll down to Setup Instructions and install the Optimize snippet. You need to copy this line of code and add it to the head of your website. It is recommended to add it at the top of the head. So you can copy it, then go to your website, and at the top of the head, add this code. Click Save. Then you will need to click Link to Analytics and select your Google Analytics 4 property. You can easily distinguish which property is GA4 by seeing this badge right here. So select the property, then select Web Data Stream, and then click Link. When it comes to verifying your setup, you should also install the Chrome extension. So in the Setup Instructions section, you should check if you have this extension installed. And if you don't have, then follow the instructions and do so. Then it's time to create your first test. So click Let's Go, and then name your experiment. So let's say that, just for sake of demonstration, I will rename the main title of the website. Then enter the URL of the page where you're going to do the experiment. In my case, that is homepage. So I will just copy it like that. Then in this case, let's say that I will be doing an A/B test. So visitors will be seeing either the original or a modification. Click Create. So before I start configuring the actual test, first what I usually do is I check the installation. So if you see a red exclamation mark right here, then click Check Installation. This will open the home page, and I see some error. This error says that the measurement ID of GA4 on this website is different than the one that is linked in the actual Google Optimize container. So now I will pause the video, I will fix the ID, and then I will hit retry. I have now changed the ID, so let's click retry and see if that works. And now I see that Optimize was installed correctly. If you try to verify and you get an error, but you are 100% sure that the measurement ID is correct, then I would recommend waiting for, let's say, 5 more minutes and then try to verify your setup once again. Now click back to Experience And let's create a variant. You can name this whatever you want, but I will just leave it and click done. And here I have an original. It will be what you see right here by default. And then I can add some alternative. We can call it a B version of the page. And now I can edit it. In this video, I am focusing more on the linking process between GA4 and Optimize. Therefore, I will not be focusing on the features of the Optimize itself. So let's say that just in my B version or my variant, I will just change the title right here. So click on the element that I want to change, click edit element, and then edit text. And I can enter something like hello there. Click done and click save. And click done. So even though I have configured my variant, this is still in draft. So it means that this is still not live for your website visitors. This is because right now we have completed 3 steps. And now the 4th step is the objective, because we have to optimize against something. How are you going to decide whether the original or the variant 1 is better? There must be some kind of number that you will be checking and you will be counting. And that can be done by scrolling down, and in the measurement and objectives section, you will see objectives. So add experiment objective. These are the objectives that you can optimize against. Your objective might be related to e-commerce, conversions. For example, here I see 2 possible conversions because I have 2 conversions configured in configure and conversions in my Google Analytics 4 property. If you have more conversions here, you will see those conversions right here. So let's say that I want to optimize against generate lead. So if I scroll up, now this experiment is ready to start. I have completed all the steps, and the final step is to click start. Then click start again. And that's it. This experiment is now running. Currently, the maximum duration of the experiment when it comes to GA4 and Optimize is 35 days, but I think that in the future they will increase that duration. So that is why I recommend that you occasionally check the documentation, and you will find the links below the video, because I think that if something changes, this should be updated. So now you might be wondering, how are you going to see this data in Google Analytics 4? Because the reports in Google Optimize will be in their usual place in the reporting section. However, keep in mind that when it comes to GA4 and Optimize, at the moment, the latency of data is longer compared to Universal Analytics. So you will see this data probably only the next day or maybe even after that. Don't panic if you see the data within the next several hours. It needs more time. Now let's go back to Google Analytics 4. So since I have already started my experiment, let's go to the website and see which variant am I going to get. And here I am in the incognito mode of my Chrome browser, and it looks like I have received the standard version, not the variant. In fact, in this browser, I will also enable the Google Analytics debugger extension. I will post a link to it below the video. So when you do that, you will start seeing data about your Google Analytics events in the debug view of Google Analytics 4. So once I enable GA debugger, you can simply do that by installing it and then clicking the icon. And then let's go to configure, debug view. And here I should see my device. And together with the page view event, you will now also get the experiment impression event. So every time an experiment is shown, and regardless of whether this is an original version or the variant, you will get this event right here. And if you click it, you will see some parameters, for example, experiment ID and variant ID. Now, I understand that these values are not very user-friendly. I mean, if you see them in the report, like, what does it mean? How can you quickly check what kind of experiment is it? Well, one of the ways that I can think of is that you just copy the experiment ID, then you go to your Google Optimize container, and here in the search field, you can enter the ID and it will return the correct experiment that is running or maybe has already completed. Then you can also click on the experiment and you will find that very same ID in details. And then you will find it in measurement and objectives section. And here is the experiment ID. When it comes to variant ID, it basically consists of the same experiment ID and then dot and then kind of like the number or the index of the variant that was shown. So 0 means original, which is this one. And then variant 1 would be displayed as 1 right here. So actually, let's check this. I am back on my website. I will open the cookies of the website and I will delete all of them. And now I will refresh the page once again. In fact, when you refresh the page, you don't have to delete all of the cookies. What matters about the experiment is this GAexp cookie. And here, after several attempts of cookie deletion, I have now refreshed the page and here is the variant 1. So now let's go to my debug view. Now I have more devices because I carelessly deleted Google Analytics cookies as well. So it means that Google is now treating me as unique devices. So now I will need to find myself. And here I found my latest device. And if I click on the experiment impression, here I will see the experiment ID, which is still the same, but the variant ID now ends with 1. So this means that a visitor saw the variant 1, not the original of the page. Now let's take a look at how can we see that data in other reports, because even though you see information in the debug view, doesn't mean that you will conveniently see it in other reports. Within the next 24 hours after you link Google Optimize with Google Analytics 4, you will start seeing a new event in your event reports. So let's go to Reports, Engagement, Events, and one of the new events will be Experiment Impression. However, if you just click on it, at least right now, you won't find any additional information such as what kind of variant was displayed and how many times did that happen. I think that in the future, when this feature comes out of beta, this will be improved, but right now you will need to do some additional configuration. So first, let's go to the exploration reports and see if you need to do some additional configuration at all. So I will choose, let's say, freeform exploration. And then in the dimensions, I should click plus and enter something like variant ID. But right now, as you can see, there is nothing. Maybe there is an experiment ID or something. We also don't see that. By the way, right now, as I'm recording this video, this dimension still doesn't work, I guess, because even after waiting for 72 hours, this dimension did not produce any proper values. And I will later show you in this video. So when you check in the exploration reports that the experiment ID or variant ID are not available, this means that you will need to configure custom dimensions for those two parameters. And once you do that, then after some time passes, you will be able to use that in your reports. But if you're watching this video further in the future and you enter experiment ID and variant ID, maybe Google will start automatically recognizing those parameters and they will be available in this list. So if you see something here, like experiment ID or variant ID, you don't have to create custom dimensions. But right now, I will have to do so. So let's go to Configure, then Custom Definitions, and create custom dimensions. Here, you can enter something like experiment ID. I can also mention that this is custom dimension, for example. So CD is custom dimension. Then scope must be event. And here I have to enter experiment ID because that is the parameter that is sent from Google Optimize to Google Analytics 4. And then click Save. Then do the same thing for the variant ID. Click again, Create Custom Dimensions, Variant ID, and let's call it Custom Dimension. And then scope again, Event, and enter Variant ID. If you don't see any suggestions right here, that is fine. Don't worry, just click Save. And then within the next 24 hours, you will start seeing some data in the event reports. So if you go to Reports, then Engagement, Events, and then scroll down to click on the Experiment Impression, you will start seeing two additional widgets, one for Variant ID and the other one for Experiment ID. So once you start seeing that, this is a good sign. However, again, this is not that much usable. I mean, you can see how many times one variant and the other variant was tracked, but that is all. So then what you should do is that you should go to Explore and use those dimensions in the analysis. So let's say freeform exploration. And then in the dimensions section, you can click plus and add variant ID and experiment ID like this and click import. Those two dimensions will be added to your analysis. Now, here's the important thing. Even though I was able to use these dimensions right away, they started reporting data in my analysis only after the next 48 hours after I configured them in my Google Analytics 4 property. So you should be patient here. If you try to use them and they don't work, then wait for another 24 hours at least. If you want to quickly check if those two dimensions started working, you can just quickly add them to the report. So this and this, you can remove columns. And if you already start seeing their values, well, this is not very convenient because their values are cut off. So I guess I could zoom out a bit. And if you start seeing the values right here, then it means that you can use them for your analysis. And now let's try to create our first analysis with these two dimensions. Or actually, one dimension is enough because experiment ID is very similar to the variant ID. So let me quickly remove the rows. And then I will create two segments. One segment is that the visitor saw the original version of the page and then converted in the same session. And the other segment will be that the visitor saw the first variant and then converted in the same session. So in segments, click plus, then click user segment, and then let's remove this block and instead add a sequence. So if a visitor saw the experiment and variance ID is the original one, so it means that it ends with the 0. And then after that, the visitor converted, and all of this happened within the same session, then that visitor will be included in this segment. So we can call this something like saw original and converted. We can also include the experiment ID. And then let's create another segment for the variant. Click user segment, then remove this block, add sequence, and then experiment impression, where variant ID is this one. Obviously, in your case, that will be a different ID. Click apply, and then within the same session, the visitor converted. So the generate lead event occurred. And then let's call this saw variant first and converted. Save and apply. So we are seeing something, but we haven't completed our analysis yet. So when it comes to adding additional dimensions, and I mean rows to this analysis, this is up to your imagination, or actually up to your questions that you want to answer. So for example, let's say that I want to check this by device category. So I will just double click on device category. And if you cannot see it right here, you should click the plus icon and find that dimension. So device category. Again, keep in mind that this is my demo account, so I'm using this property only from my desktop. Therefore, I just have the desktop data. But if I also used mobile devices, I would see this report based on the device category. So I would see some number for desktop and some number for mobile devices. And here, for example, I can see that there were 3 users in total who saw the variant, not the original, and converted. And then I have 1 visitor who saw the original and converted. So at least in the beginning, I could say that this variant is performing better, but these kind of numbers are way, way, way too small to draw the conclusion because these results are far from being statistically significant. So I should collect way more data, and I mean like, thousands of users, maybe even tens of thousands of users or even more, depending on your calculations. And then I could draw the conclusion. But right now, at least I can see in this report how different device groups are performing, and I combine that data with the variant information. So as you can see, this looks flexible. However, it takes more effort to build a report like that, and you need to be already comfortable with exploration reports. Also, what I've noticed is that there's another dimension, as I've mentioned it before. So click plus on the dimensions section and then start entering experiment. And here you will see some built-in predefined A/B testing experiment event dimension. So if I add it, unfortunately right now at this moment of recording this video, this dimension doesn't return anything useful, because if I add it to the report right here, it just returns not set. But I guess that this dimension somehow is related to optimized integration. So maybe in the future, it will return some meaningful values. So keep an eye on that as well. If we compare Google Optimized integration in Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics, at the moment, there are a lot of limitations when it comes to GA4. But I think that's the reason why it is still called beta. But there is one significant improvement that was previously available only to the paid customers of Universal Analytics, and that is audience targeting. So here I have created another experiment. It is still a draft, but in this experiment, I will click Start by adding audience targeting rules. And here I can select conditions that must be met for the experiment to start. And here is option that is available in Google Analytics 4 right now for free. So if I click it, I can here select one of the audience in my Google Analytics 4 property. And audiences are controlled in configure in GA4 and audiences right here. So right now, this is a demo property. I don't have any audiences except the default ones that are all users and purchasers. But if you added more of them right here, then they would eventually appear here as well. So for example, you could create an audience that consists of people who did not purchase from you, and then you can show an A/B test only to them. Or maybe you want to target people who have completed a particular sequence of events, because you can create audiences as sequences like this. So for example, if someone completed one step, then the other one, then the other one, then they will enter the audience. And once they do that, then they will be eligible to participate in your test. But obviously, you need to keep in mind that narrowing down your audience means that the overall traffic of your website must be huge in order to run statistically valid experiments. If you want to learn more about audiences in Google Analytics 4, then check the link below the video because I will post some additional resources. And that is how you can link Google Optimize with Google Analytics 4. I hope that in the future, the experiment ID and variant ID dimensions will be available in GA4 by default. But before that happens, you will need to create custom dimensions and be patient until that data becomes available in places like exploration reports. If you found this video useful, hit the thumbs up button below the video because it helps me continue working on this channel. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4, then consider subscribing to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.